Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at the recent developments in the country. The first, of course, is the National Security Committee meeting that was chaired by the Prime Minister Shehbaz. This was an important meeting and was cited a lot by the PTI leadership, claiming the fact that this is going to be another excuse put forward by the current political setup to run away from the elections. Contrary to that, we saw in the press release what was decided and talked about was with reference to the anti-terrorism operation, which was decided by the National Security Committee meeting in continuance from the meeting earlier that was held in January earlier this year after the attack in Peshawar police lines. And the decision with regards to a zero tolerance policy was reiterated, and the decision of going forward with an all-out operation against terrorism within the country was again stated by the committee meeting. It was also talked about how the reason behind these particular spikes in terrorist activities within the country is related to the soft policy that was extended towards these terrorist organizations by the previous regime, and as a result of allowing them to get back into the society and also the release of certain prisoners is why the terrorist groups reassigned themselves and got help from large numbers in Afghanistan. And because of that, the kind of situation that Pakistan is currently witnessing today with regards to terrorism is what we are dealing with. Of course, yet again, the press release talked about defeating all nefarious designs and all enemies of the country, and to protect the people of the country by supporting the anti-terrorism activities in an all-out operation. A committee will also be taking a look at the progress, the hindrances, and the obstacles within this operation in a 2 weeks' time as well. So this is going to be, of course, an important discussion with regards to the National Security Committee meeting that was discussed, and how exactly will this play out and what sort of an operation can we see within the country, especially in terms of the current political and economic crisis that Pakistan is facing, and how exactly will this eventually play out. Of course, this National Security Committee meeting came at the backdrop of the kind of constitutional crisis that we've been witnessing between the judiciary and the parliament for the past couple of days. And another important development with regards to that was, of course, that the National Assembly passed a resolution rejecting the Supreme Court's judgment, which was talked about by various communities as something which doesn't have any legal binding effect, but will have its impact in the rift that now exists between the judiciary and the executive. And it's also important in terms of what the political parties have called out for, which is the resignation of the Chief Justice of Pakistan, a sentiment that was echoed by Mr. Nawaz Sharif as well, along with, of course, the top leadership of the current political setup. This was something, of course, that has been spoken with regards to the impartiality of the Chief Justice of Pakistan, his misconduct, and the fact that the decision of the minority was given more importance than the decision of the majority. In another development, of course, a reference has also been filed against the Chief Justice of Pakistan, also talking about his misconduct and that he should step down. This has been given to the Supreme Judicial Council, and of course this remains to be seen again as what has been referred to the larger threat that exists to the CJP, not from the executive but within the judiciary. So we're going to see how exactly will this actually play out in terms of the current political crisis, of course, with regards to the elections as well, for which we know that May 14th is the date that was given by the Supreme Court, of course rejected by the Parliament, but notified by the ECP. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi. We've also been joined in the studios by Mr. Usama Khawar Ghumman, who's law professor at LUMS and advocate High Courts of Pakistan. We've also been joined by online by Mr. Ali Rashid, who's leader PPP. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining and being part of the discussion today. Let me start with you, Usama. With regards to what is happening, of course, there are big question marks and fingers being raised, of course, at the CJP, but also in broader terms against the judiciary. And an important aspect of that, which is being highlighted, of course, is the two-pronged threat that exists, of course, one coming in from the parliamentarians and then also from within the judiciary. First, your comments on exactly how unusual or how grave the situation is now for the judiciary and the CJP, and what sort of impact will that eventually hold for the judicial system of the country?
Thank you, Sana. So Sana, there are two aspects to this entire crisis vis-a-vis your question. And one is more the question of the legal norms, the norms of propriety, and the way in which parliamentary democracies, where there is a separation between the three branches, what are the proper norms, and the other is on ground the actual sort of danger which is to all the institutions concerned. So, starting with the first prong, I think it's a very unusual situation, and it seems like medieval in one sense. So, there are three pillars of state. There has been consistent sort of interference since last decade and a half by the judiciary and particularly Supreme Court in the affairs of two other branches of the state, that being Parliament and Executive. Until now, the Parliament and Executive, they have respected this judicial outreach, but it appears that they have had enough after a decade and a half of this unrelenting interference, and now things have come to a pass, and now they are also not planning to back off. So, for example, there is a constitutional bar. So, there are certain parliamentary privileges that have a long history, emanated from the mother of all parliaments, UK's parliament, and one of those in those privileges, that the members of parliament, they enjoy unqualified almost immunity from the speeches made in the parliament. But our constitution makes this exception that says that in parliament the conduct of judges cannot be discussed. But so it appears that the parliaments, they are not left with any other option. So, they are now passing resolutions and speaking about the conduct of the Supreme Court in the parliament itself. But I would say it is the judiciary that is primarily to blame. But what the parliament can legitimately do is pass a law, and which they have done, and now the president should urgently sign that law, so that bill, so it becomes a law and become operationalized. Now, the second aspect of the question, which is what are the actual consequences in real terms, and I think the situation is very dire. So the Chief Justice and group of his like-minded judges, as they have been called, they are refusing to accept the writ of the parliament and also the internal institutional norms and also the decisions of their brother judges. So, they have revolted, and for example, out of those 7 member bench, the 4 justices are consistently saying one after another, and through judgments, very detailed and solid judgments, they are telling the Chief Justice and his 3 brothers that they are in minority, but Chief Justice, using his capacity as an administrative head of the Supreme Court and his ability to fix cases, has been consistently manipulating, prima facie manipulating the system, and trying to impose a judgment which he lost fair and square in a 7-member bench. But he's refusing to obey a judgment of 4 other justices, and I think in that sense that it can, considering our history, there's a chaos, and there could be a repeat either of what happened in 1997 with Justice Sajjad Ali Shah, or also extra constitutional forces. They can also step in, and because people are sick and tired of this whole drama.
Right. With regards to, of course, the National Security Committee meeting, Mr. Ali Rashid, it's an important one, but especially in terms of the backdrop of the kind of crisis that we've just talked about is also important. This was, of course, pointed out by the PTI leadership prior to the meeting as well, claiming that maybe some sort of a discussion around these issues is going to come forward, and we're going to see some sort of excuse by the political setup regarding elections. But what is actually part of the National Security Committee meeting is extremely important in terms of the spike in terrorist activities that we have seen. But where we stand today in terms of the question marks around elections in Punjab, the kind of political crisis that we've seen within the various political parties, and then of course the economic situation, how exactly will we be able to ensure and move forward with the decisions of the National Security Committee meeting, and what do you think may be the most important aspect for the current political setup?
Thank you so much. You see, the thing is, as you said, the national security meeting happened, and it turned out to be business as usual. The military leadership briefing the parliamentarians or the government about what is going on in the country, the threats from different aspects, and it also turned out to be what it proved, that the conspiracy theories, which the PTI was, earlier saying that this will be used as an excuse, and in this meeting elections will be discussed. Nothing like that happened. They were proven wrong again, and it was proven that these are nothing but conspiracies and theories which PTI likes to do play with. Here, that being said, PPP, I'll talk about PPP. PPP just had a central committee meeting of the core committee, and the leadership has decided that we will go to all the parties in the coalition and we'll discuss this, that what do they have in mind, because I think dialogue is very important. We want to speak to all the political parties, get them on board separately, what they have in mind, and we want to avoid this kind of crisis. We don't want, and we feel that Pakistan cannot afford this kind of confrontation. Now, whatever is happening with the judges, with the Supreme Court, they're divided themselves. I think they have some issues going on, and where one bench, one group of judges are saying that, they have the majority and things should be a certain way, which the coalition government is also endorsing, that yes, the majority decision was not what the Chief Justice is saying, it was actually the other one. So this is what the debate is all about. But eventually the dust will settle and we'll find out. But PPP has decided that whatever the constitution says, the elections should happen in the due time. But at the same time, for the sake of fair play, all the elections, including the National Assembly elections, should also happen at the same time as the elections for Punjab and KP. Otherwise, tomorrow, say if in Punjab Mr. Khan or Imran Khan or PTI doesn't win, they'll say that there wasn't a caretaker set up at federal, and it was PMLN's government or it was the PDM government. That's why I'm rejecting the outcome in case PTI doesn't win from Punjab and KP. He'll say there wasn't a caretaker set up. Yeah, in federal. Yeah.
Right, but what about the constitution regarding the 90-day period and the, of course, assemblies being dissolved and then the 90-day period to be followed as per the constitution? I understand that's not being followed on May 14th as well, but that's where, of course, the question first arose from, that we need to follow the constitution. What about that?
Look, as I said, they can, first of all, 90 days are. It's not happening in 90 days, right? Even 14th May, it's more than 90 days. So technically, in the letter and spirit, the constitution is not being followed. A. B. But the judgment and whatever the courts say, eventually, whatever will happen legally, we are with it. We are with the constitution. We want things to happen constitutionally, but we have a constitutional crisis. Things like this have never happened before, where the Chief Justice is making a bench in a certain way. The doctrine of law says that law and implementation of law shouldn't just happen, but it should also seem like it's happening. So when you have the entire parliament against the judgment, you have bar councils and associations against the judgment, and the fact that the Chief Justice is not allowing a full court for this, what difference would it make? So some people excusing themselves, some people are not wanting to be part of it. The second most senior judge of the Supreme Court is saying this is not even correct, the way the bench was made. Why can't you just have a full court? And even PTI has no issue with it. Mr. Imran Khan is on record and he said, I have no issue, full court kar le. So why not? I think it'll be a win-win for everybody, and everybody said we'll accept the decision of the full court. But when the Chief Justice is acting in this shady manner, so it becomes a bit questionable, right? So hence
right. Of course, at the end
Yeah.
of the day, that was the CJP's call on the former Prime Ministers. But Farrukh, with regards to the National Security Committee meeting, an important aspect of the press release also mentioned the fact that all the nefarious designs of the country's enemies are going to be defeated. And at the same time, they of course also mentioned the kind of soft policy that was given to the terrorists in the past and how they were allowed to return back. And because of that, the kind of current crisis that we're witnessing today exists. But when we talk about the the country's enemies, and in that sense that perhaps it becomes a lot more than just the terrorist organizations. It also becomes about the facilitators or the people who actually allowed that to happen. Will action be also taken against them?
Right, Sanam. First of all, actually, let me begin by once again complimenting you on your astuteness. The way, Ali Rashid was actually going through this very tight rope walk, and you finally brought him out, and he has been very clear, finally. So initially I thought, boy, this is some really serious tightrope walk, right? But eventually we understood what he was saying, and that is great, heartening to hear from him as well. Remember, Sana, whenever a bullet is fired, you can underestimate the bullet, but the bullet knows who is the target, right? The verdict that came out was on April 4th. And April 4th is, if I'm not mistaken, is the death anniversary, the anniversary of hanging of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. So I thought that there was a very clear message. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto might, belong to the entire country, but he essentially belongs to People's Party. He is the founder of People's Party as well as the Constitution of Pakistan as well. Now, your question regarding NSE, I think that today's statement that came out, the readout, was very clear in 2 or 3 things that was amazing. One, it has actually introduced this idea. Once again, we are headed towards a comprehensive, operation against terrorism. That is very clear now, and all parties seem to be on the same page. Then the second thing that was amazing was fixing of responsibility. Why are we seeing a spike in terrorism? And the statement is very clear that, jet black terrorists were brought back to the country. Who brought them, Sana? Everybody knows. It was during PTI's time. So fixing of responsibility is also very clear, right? Remember that in all this mishmash soup of political activism of PTI, while we keep on talking about one deadline after the other, for example, they try to actually hold elections before the appointment of army chief. Then now it is, now they are trying to get some kind of elections before the, elevation of the next Chief Justice of Pakistan. But this issue of terrorism is also at the heart of the matter. It is PTI that brought these jet black terrorists back to the country. It rehabilitated it. Of course, there was a journal involved. General Faiz Hamid is mentioned. General Bajwa should, by the way, also be mentioned because it was happening on his watch. So today, this thing was very clear as well. Then again, something very awesome that I saw. This the mention of the foreign-funded propaganda campaign against state institutions. You know what they are talking about. You know how this is going on. You know which party supporters from abroad are consistently actually launching attacks on Pakistan Army and Pakistan intelligence agencies. One of supporters of PTI is sitting in UK, and every day he keeps on implying that somehow something is cooking and something is going to happen in the country. And similarly, another gentleman, although by the way, the message for him, we know where he is sitting. He is not sitting in UK, not in London, but by the way, he claims that he is in UK and he keeps on using a VPN as well. Similarly, a gentleman claims that he is in Canada and he also tries to incite mutiny within the army ranks. So this was a fitting response to these elements as well. And finally, because I wanted to keep the answer part at the end, Sana, I think that we are moving towards holding every facilitator, every sympathizer to account. Okay. And that's why I think that there's incremental movement towards naming and shaming the elements who might have supported such elements. And eventually, Sana, because remember, one thing that I mentioned yesterday as well, that a detox process is going on within the state apparatus of the country. And that is because since 2011 to 14, we started building up some critical mass that keeps on frustrating the state's policies. National election plan took place. it was also framed immediately. What happens? Somebody actually starts talking about corruption as the economic terrorism, and immediately focus shifts to the political parties which were signatory on the national election plan, right? Such elements have been trying to destabilize and frustrate the state's intention, conviction to fight terrorism to the last terrorist, right? And I think that once this detox completes, all these elements will be smoked out and held to account.
Well, that's great. Accountability, of course, is welcome. Mr. Usama, the reference that we discussed earlier against the CJP is also important in terms of the crisis that Pakistan is facing. And of course, we know that earlier the Prime Minister also ordered a legal committee to decide on what sort of actions can be taken with regards to the Supreme Court judgment. And when we take a look at this reference and, of course, now how things will unfold, what sort of possibilities now exist for this to actually play out, and how exactly can that be challenged by the CJP himself?
Sana, so there's a constitutional article, which is Article 209 of the Constitution, which establishes Supreme Judicial Council, and also a bare minimum of rules are provided, and then there are also two set of rules concerning the procedures to be adopted. One is from 2005, procedure of inquiry, and then there are Supreme Judicial Council rules from later years as well. So, first, very briefly, what is the procedure? So, according to the Constitution and law, anyone can file a member of the public can file a reference, except the government. If the government has to file a reference, then they would have to then the government would have to go through the president, and the president would have to make up his mind. So, it appears that a citizen of Pakistan has filed a reference, and the Constitution says, Article 209 of that any member of the Supreme Judicial Council against whom there's a complaint, he cannot be part of the council concerning that reference.
Right.
So, at this moment, chairperson is the Chief Justice, and since there's a reference against him, so he should not be part of the Supreme Judicial Council. And the next senior most person, which is Justice Qazi Faiz Isa, he would be the acting chairperson, and he should proceed with this reference ASAP concerning there's a serious constitutional and legal crisis, and there are serious allegations.
And how exactly will that unfold?
And Sana, with your permission, let me add to this question as well. Barrister Sahab, I want to understand, Professor Sahab, regarding how things are actually shaping up. I understand that if some justice is in contention, he cannot sit in NSC meeting, Supreme Judicial Council's meeting. But pray tell me, before that, it is not automatically triggered, right? There has to be admission of that petition. So there will be another bench that will decide, and the CJ can sit there and he can decide whether to accept or not.
So Pitafi sir, with great respect, my interpretation is very different and is based upon law. So the 2005 procedure of inquiry, so there's rule number 5, if I'm not mistaken, that precisely hints towards this very sort of situation. So it says that the member of public can file a reference, and it can be received by any member of the Supreme Judicial Council and the secretary. So ordinarily, it is only the secretariat or the chairperson who can receive, and it is precisely to cater for these sort of situations, because we know there's a long list of references that is pending. For example, the reference pending against another Justice Muzahir Ali Naqvi, and Chief Justice, instead of taking up that reference, he threatened the complainants in open court and prejudged that reference. So I would say that reading together how the long-standing principles of administration of justice, which say that one cannot be a judge in his own cause. So if it was left to just to the discretion of the Chief Justice to process this reference, that would never happen, because as we saw in Chief Justice Saqib Nisar's case, there are a large number of civil society organizations, very credible, and women rights group especially, they filed a reference, but he did not take it up. So the principles of justice, impartiality, and the rules dictate, the combined reading dictates that it is not left to the discretion of the Chief Justice as the chairperson of the Supreme Judicial Council to initiate process. It would automatically be assumed that the next person, because it's the constitution that says that he would not be part of the Supreme Judicial Council. So that is the language. So part also means that he no longer has administrative powers concerning processing. So I think if Chief Justice is excluded, the acting chairperson of the Supreme Judicial Council, Justice Qadi Faiz Isa, he should immediately follow the procedure, give notices. So procedure is the acting chairperson can ask one of the other council members to examine the reference and present a report. So he should forward the reference to a committee of council members or one of the council members, and then call for the report and then initiate proceeding. So, so after his ouster, Chief Justice ouster, the next person in line who would be interestingly sitting in the Supreme Judicial Council would be Justice Ijazul Hasan. So in my view, since this reference and the entire controversy has been vis-a-vis Justice Ijazul Hasan, Chief Justice, and Justice Munib, and so they should not sit in the Supreme Judicial Council. So it should be the next person in line, which is Justice Mansoor Ali Shah. So the law, right to fair trial, Article 10A of the Constitution demands that the fresh composition of the Supreme Judicial Council for the purposes of this reference should be Qadi Faiz Isa being the acting chairperson. The second member would be Justice Tariq Masood, and the third member, Supreme Court member, would be Justice Mansoor Ali Shah, and then two senior most Chief Justices, one from Sindh High Court and one from Lahore High Court. They are the two. So this is a 5-member council, and this council should immediately proceed for the because there are serious constitutional crises taking place, and before it gets out of hand, as Justice Atar Manila in his judgment, which is a remarkably candid judgment, that in a sense that it one sense appears to be a self-reflection about the role of judiciary in this country's history, and it acknowledges the mistakes that have been done since Maulvi Tamizuddin case, and subsequently hanging of one prime minister and dismissal of 2 prime ministers in just 1 decade. Yusuf Raza Gilani, and then recently in Panama case judgment. So it's a remarkably self-indicting and very honest judgment about the role of judiciary.
It is.
So in that sense, but most importantly, Sana and Pitafi Saab, Justice Atar Manila quotes this famous maxim about the power of judiciary. He says the judiciary does not have forces with it, the raw arm of the state, which is sword, and neither does it have purse, which the parliament has budget making power. The only power judiciary has is moral authority. That is the only effective tool for the judiciary to implement its decisions, and it appears that the present judiciary is fast losing its credibility. And my fear as a citizen, and all of us fears as a citizen, should be that the judiciary, which does not have moral credibility, that means it cannot enforce its decisions, and that means trouble for all of us, because ultimately the constitution makes judiciary the primary protector of the fundamental rights. So it is going to affect all of us, all of our lives and rule of law in this country.
Right, absolutely, and thank you for that comprehensive analysis. Mr. Ali Rashid, the discussion, of course, around the Chief Justice of Pakistan has been blatantly shared with regards to, of course, the National Assembly's resolution, but we've also been hearing the PMLN leaders talking about the resignation of the CJP, including Nawaz Sharif and others who've called out for the Chief Justice of Pakistan to also resign in light of the questionable moral credibility of him and, of course, the judiciary as well. With regards to the PPP stance, I know, of course, that the resolution is also supported, but with regards to the resignation of the CJP and the reference that has been filed, what do you think will be the right course of action now moving forward, or the course of action that is supported by the PPP?
The thing is that I was watching some guy from PTI, I'm not sure who it was, saying that out of a parliament of a National Assembly of 342 people, only 42 people have signed that resolution. But you don't need the entire National Assembly to sign a resolution to pass it. It can only be 10 people as well. But the majority of the people did vote for the resolution to be passed. So the National Assembly did pass it. And at that time, which can be checked, and it's on document. Four people from the PTI, four members, four MNAs from the PTI were present in Parliament at that time, and they didn't vote against it, which is also something which I found a bit strange, that they didn't oppose it, they didn't vote against it. I wonder why. But that being said, the right course of action would be to, as soon as possible, I think these constitutional crises, we already have so many crises going on right now. The country has economical challenges, we have the IMF issue, we have so many issues going on. I think all the stakeholders should sit down and come to some kind of, resolve it as soon as possible. And I don't understand why PTI is being such a crybaby about it, because look, April is, we are in almost middle of April, then it'll be May and June, and in July is the last month anyways. August, the assemblies will be gone anyway. So in these 2 months, what will PTI achieve by, they're just trying to create nuisance, and they're just trying to destabilize the country, and that's all that's happening. If you look at the economical issues right now, 75% of them are because of political uncertainty and political instability. So if we had just come, and now Imran Khan saying, I'm ready to talk, I'm ready to come to the table, and I'm ready to discuss it if it's about elections. I mean, we've been telling him to come for the longest time. For 1 year, he's been on the road. Sometimes he'll be giving his dharna, sometimes he'll be doing his long marches, but not once would he be ready to talk. He's, so we just need to resolve all these issues as soon as possible.
Right, and I want to talk a little bit more about the possibility of dialogue with the PTI chairman, but just want a quick clarification with regards to the CJP's resignation or the reference as well, because I'm not sure what the PPP stance is on whether or not the CJP should resign, or if there has been any call made by the PPP's leadership regarding the resignation. And secondly, with regards to the PTI chairman's dialogue, of course, we've heard in the past also at some point that he'd say something and then act otherwise, but and now, of course, with the kind of highly polarized situation and then the judicial crisis that's going on as well, do you think that this will even be something that will actually translate into action?
I think we haven't, I think our party hasn't asked the Chief Justice to step down, but there is a reference which has been filed against him. So whatever is decided, and whatever the law and the Constitution says, in light of that, we will stand with the Constitution, and we will stand with the verdict, or whatever it is. Either if he's found to be guilty, or if he has done some misconduct, we will fully support whatever the courts decide. We'll fully support what the Constitution says. And as for Mr. Khan and PTI, if that's happening, it's very, I know that PDM wants it. I know PPP wants it. I know everybody wants somehow to resolve these issues. But Mr. Khan, I don't know. One day he says one thing, the next day he's saying, and then another thing. He's the only person, I think, which I've come across in my life, who can contradict a statement in one statement of his. He'll say something in the beginning, and by the time that statement ends, he'll be saying something different. And it's just alarming, and it's like I'm flabbergasted that how can anybody be like that. But hopefully, fingers crossed, we're hoping that things are resolved, and we can go through, and all elections can happen. But we feel that all elections should happen at the same time, because we feel that this kind of turmoil will arise again. If all elections are not held together, and if Mr. Imran Khan does not get the kind of result he wants in Punjab and KP, again he'll blame the federal government. He'll say, since there was not a caretaker set up, these elections were not free and fair.
Right,
so
and as per the elections in Punjab, do you see the possibility of them actually happening on May 14th? And will the PPP be following the schedule as notified by the ECP?
Well, we've started. Well, it totally depends. I think within a week or two, whatever the dust will settle. We'll get to know constitutionally what happens with this reference which has been filed. What happens with the, we'll say, the figure of speech is, the jury is still out on that one. So similarly, as soon as we find
It
out,
might take a long time, and I believe the first date where an action needs to be taken is the 10th, which is Monday.
Monday, the April?
April 10th, yes.
Yeah, so we have plenty of time to decide if we will go into elections or not, because that's May 14th, right? So we'll, as I said, within a week or 10 days, we'll find out exactly where we stand.
All right. Farrukh, with regards to, of course, the Supreme Court judgment being in a question mark, and now, of course, with the reference, the position of the CJP and what sort of political stance the Parliament is going to be taking in. At the same time, of course, the ECP has notified its schedule and the election date. It seems that both of these developments are running in parallel, but perhaps in different directions. How exactly will we be able to align the two if the judgment is now at these crossroads?
Right. Sana, we don't need to align anything at all. We just have to wait and see what exactly happens. I'll take you back to the metaphor that I used yesterday of a slow boiling frog, right? The way things are going, actually, government has everything in its favor. Yesterday, I was saying time in its favor. I think at this moment, everything is in the government's favor. So the government does not need to actually hasten up anything at all. You are right, on Monday there is a requirement to actually release some funds. If you listen to the media actually keeps on saying that the additional supplementary money bill can be introduced, and then that can be defeated. Media does not understand that as per the rules of the Parliament, if such a resolution fails, not resolution, a motion fails, the government falls. So this is not an appropriate idea. I think that whatever decision has to be taken by the executive. And I'm sure that the executive at this time can release some funds, give them rope, allow them some space, and see what exactly happens. But regarding what Ghumman Sahab was earlier saying, I understand what he was talking about regarding Supreme Judicial Council and how it functions. But the problem at this moment is that we keep on, struggling under the illusion that everything is hunky-dory or systems will be followed. For example, let me remind everybody how this suo motu was taken up. A services matter is taken up by the Supreme Court of Pakistan, where appointment or posting of a CCPO is the issue. And all of a sudden, one justice, Justice Naqvi, actually calls over the Chief Justice of Pakistan and thoroughly harasses him, and then asks the Chief Justice to take suo motu. Since then, that case has been withdrawn by the very same CCPO. I mean, that the man was only used as a jumping board to get whatever he wanted. Then the Chief Justice actually, constitutes this 9-member bench. Justice Mansoor Ali Shah's verdict or decision or opinion has actually clarified. It has actually cited a precedent by the Supreme Court of Pakistan that once one bench is constituted, Chief Justice's powers of administration actually ceases to function there. He cannot reconstitute the bench, and then he does this miracle that if you are going to eliminate 2 of my supporters, I am going to eliminate 2 of your supporters, and then I am going to keep the balance, right? And in the end, it became 3 judges, only like-minded judges. And after that also, because the suo motu was rejected by 4 members or 7-member bench, now we are told that 3 plus 4 is 5. So if that is the case, it is not merely legal doctrine which is on the line, it is pure mathematics as well. And because of that common sense failure, we are facing the kind of circumstances that are there. My concern at this moment, Sana, is that we keep on expecting a lot from justices who have suffered a lot already. Today's, detailed judgment by or opinion by Justice Athar Minhalla was an act of bravery. But should we keep on asking everybody to keep on putting their own necks on line? For example, Qazi Isa is someone who had to actually go through such horrible mess that he had to become a lawyer and plead his own case. With that kind of a situation, should we be asking them to actually just start this process immediately? I think at this moment, the government has everything in its favor. For example, the CJ, the very CJ, if you do nothing, he retires in September. Similarly, the president who might be blocking the law, that is regarding these rules, he cannot block it beyond 20 days ahead, right? And that president is also going to retire by the end of this year. So everything is actually in government's favor, thanks to PTI. And I think PTI got greedy, otherwise through Lahore High Court's judgment. By the way, one word was used by our worthy friend Ali Rashid, and that was doctrine of law. So I think that you are looking only in towards Islamabad. Otherwise, if you start looking towards Lahore, you will see that there is a doctrine of in-law also in being invoked there. And because of that sideshow that is going on, there's so much confusion right now that instead of actually asking people to just perform harakiri or some kind of seppuku, it is better to wait and see what becomes of them. I told you about the atmospherics which are going to change. Thanks to Imran Khan Sahab and thanks to all this greed that actually kind of tried to push everything very quickly, very fast. They have actually destroyed their perfect case in Lahore High Court, where perhaps after this intra-court appeal, the case would have ended up with the very same Supreme Court, and then nobody could raise a finger. But because they wanted haste, they spoiled the curry.
Right.
And similarly, regarding Imran Khan Sahab, I think the efficiency with which he has alienated every person in this country. I'm talking about every state institution and even in judiciary, with the exception of 3 gentlemen who have actually stuck their necks out for him in his love. The rest have been alienated. So the government can thank Imran Khan and just wait and see what becomes of all this thing.
Right. Thank you very much, Farrukh. Thank you, Usama, for joining us. And thank you, Mr. Ali Rashid, for being a part of the debate. That's all we have from now. There is still a lot that remains to be said in terms of the developments that seem to be coming day by day. But of course, what we can hope for is that the security and of course the best interests of the people are protected. And at least with the National Security Committee meeting, we saw that today, and we hope that we move on to a safer and peaceful Pakistan. That's all that we have from the debate. Have a nice weekend. We'll see you Monday. Is it Friday? Is it?